Alright, so I'm in the airport right now, but I'm gonna try and do my story anyways. So this story is supposed to be a personal story about me, and I'm gonna do one about a time I traveled to a foreign land. So, growing up in Washington with my family and knowing Alex, I had never really traveled that much. I've never really traveled. I mean, I've traveled like a little bit with my family to like Mexico or Hawaii, but that was only for like a week or two at a time. And so when it was in January of 2012, and my husband and I mean Alex and I, decided that we couldn't find work in Washington and we just had nowhere else to go. And so my father-in-law, who was not my father-in-law at the time, uh, told me, hey, you should look into coming up to Barrow since they need substitute teachers up here and they need secretaries up here. And so, and you can come up here, you can stay with me, you just pay, low rent, what they require, and you guys can just work. Because I had just graduated from esthetician school and I had a lot of debt. So it was a crazy one because my father-in-law was just telling us, okay, so if you're going to come up here, you have to bring food up here. And I was like, what? Isn't there food already up there? He's like, yes, but it's very expensive and it's very costly and it's rural. And I just remember starting that whole process of, when you're down in the lower 48, you have these big plastic totes and you have to fill them up with stuff. At least this is what I do because I try and like save money. But, you do that, and I learned from that point right off the bat that that's what you do. And I remember that was just so strange to me because I'm not used to this whole different lifestyle of going all the way up north. But at the time, so this was very odd to me having to do this. It's actually kind of strange trying to recall upon it because I've been used to it for so long now that it's hard to try and remember what I thought, but I'm still trying to do it. So, and then I remember going to the grocery store like a couple weeks before Barrow and like shopping for things like nuts and berries and dried fruits and stuff like that, things that can hold shelf stable for a while. And uh, I remember telling people, they're like, oh, what are you buying all this food for? I'm like, oh, I'm getting ready to go to a place called Barrow, Alaska. And they'd be like, oh, you're going there? I've heard of that place before. Isn't it like really, really dark? And it's interesting because like the many different people who I've talked to during that time, like if I told anybody I was going to Barrow, some people knew what it was and some people were like, oh man, you're going there. It is so cold. And I remember just thinking, where am I going? Like, what am I going to get myself into? I've never ever ventured that far away from home before. So it was going to be a whole new experience for me. And I was just going with Alex and then his dad. So I remember um, the day that we woke up and we were going to go get on our flight. And we chose an early morning flight so we could get there in one day, in one shot. And I remember we arrived to the airport late and it was really upsetting, but we ended up getting on another flight. And it was just so stressful because we had all these bags and we were late, so we had to drive all the way back home because the next flight didn't go out for like another 5 hours. And so we were like, we're not going to wait there. So we decided to pack everything back up in the car and then drive back home. And then we came back and it was just kind of like stressful because I was just anticipating to go to get on the airplane and just start going because I kind of like when I get ready to go somewhere I tend to talk myself into it, especially if I'm going to a new place. That's how I kind of get used to it. And I try and talk myself into it, let myself know what it's going to be like. Prior to also going up to Barrow, I just remembered I looked up a lot of YouTube videos. I was doing a lot of research just exactly what Barrow looked like. And I remember there was this one YouTube video I found. I should probably go find it and see if I know anybody in there now because it's such a small town. But I remember there was a video of somebody going through the Barrow grocery store and they were like going on the orange, and all of a sudden they like the orange juice and they show the price of the orange juice. And same thing with cereal and chips. and avocados and watermelon, and it was just outrageous pricing. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I was just not even used to this kind of like lifestyle at all. And I remember there being another video of somebody who had I don't think he caught the walrus now that I know, but back then I thought he caught a walrus. I thought they hunted for walrus up there. And there was a video of a man who he had a walrus or something, and he was like he had it attached to a rope, and he was like letting the ocean kind of clean it. Like he had it out. I think I believe this is the same video, but he the walrus is being cleaned by the ocean, like the tides coming in and then like washing it out. I think it was an old walrus or something. But and he was also boiling the tusks in like a big pot. And I was like, oh my gosh, they eat walrus up here. That's crazy. Not really. um, so so when we got on that later flight, we actually had to lay over in Fairbanks. I remember at the time, and we went up in January. So and my father-in-law, told me, okay, it's going to be really dark. It's 24-hour darkness all the time, but I remember thinking, okay, that's not so bad because at least there's lights inside the house. So when Alex and I were flying up, I remember like looking out the window, like when I was in the airport, and just watching, you know, the light go away. The sun just went away, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the last time I'm gonna see it for a while. And you're just looking out the airplane, and it's just getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until it's completely dark. And then we were up in Fairbanks. We landed in Fairbanks. Gosh, I don't even know what time it was. It was like really late. But I remember we were the only ones in the airport, and the whole entire airport was closed. And I think it might have been around 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. And I remember there was no lights coming out. There was no. I remember like putting my face up against the window because it was just my reflection. But I remember putting it up, and it was just like a blizzard, and it was just dark. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it felt like it felt like I was on another planet. Just even being in Fairbanks, right? So, and then after a while, our flight to Barrow, they called, flight to Barrow, it's going to board. And so we got on that flight, and we were very, very tired because in the Fairbanks airport, it was they were playing very loud music, and we couldn't go to sleep. So we had to take turns. This sounds really funny, but so Alex had to take a turn sleeping, and I'd plug his ears with my fingers. Like I put my fingers in his ears so he could sleep because the music was like this really bad 80s rock bad. Like it wasn't bad music, but it was just bad for our mood because we were trying to sleep. So we had to take turns, and he'd plug my ears, then I'd take a turn, and and then I'd plug his ears, or that whole thing. So that was really funny. I will forever remember that. And then when we got to Barrow, I don't even remember what time of the day it was. It probably was in the morning, obviously, if I was in Fairbanks that early in the morning. And it was dark. I just remember walking out of the tunnel, like when you walk out of Alaska Airlines, it's like a rounded tunnel. I just remember looking and going, oh my gosh, and the street lights were on, and it was dark, and it was snow blowing. And you know what? Actually, let me go back. I remember when I got off the plane, because my father-in-law told me wear a jacket, and I said, oh, whatever, I'll wear a jacket, but I'm not going to take it that seriously. And I remember getting off the plane, and like the first breath I took, I remember like getting off, and I was like, okay, it's not that cold. And then I started to breathe in, and I was like, whoa, it like, the freezing cold weather here like freezes your lungs. It's like a different kind of cold because when you're breathing it in, it's like dry and it's cold, and it's just like those things. Yeah. So, and then when I went to when I stepped outside of the airport, because like I was walking with my husband, and my hood was up, so I didn't really look around that much. But I remember like when we walked out of the airport, we got all our bags, and I walked out, and I was like, oh my gosh, where am I? Because the street lights were on, and it was dark, and it was windy, and it was just so strange to me. And then Brian picked us up, and he took us to the teacher templex, which was just right around the corner from the airport. Not used to that at all, you know, totally like the airport's right next to your house. And gosh, it was just such a strange culture shock. Uh, and going inside of the house and just, I remember for the longest time I'd just look out the window and just look, because there was we have the graveyard in our backyard, and I would just always look at that and just look at just how different it was, and how there was no mountains and no trees. And I remember I did kind of prepare myself for that, because Brian did tell me there's no mountains or no trees there, and I was like, whatever, I'm fine. I want to go on an adventure. I want to go to a different foreign land. Even though it's still the United States, it still feels like it's not completely the US. Like, it is, of course, but like by law, but like it's just totally different with the whole Inupiaq culture and how it's rural and all that. And um, so the whole conclusion of this is that this was like that time I went to Barrow, especially since I was there for 5.5 months straight. The first time I went, I did not leave. I did not go to Fairbanks. I didn't go anywhere else. I stayed there for 5.5 months straight. It was a definite. I got cabin fever. I think I'm pretty sure I did, because I started to go a bit nuts by like month 4. I was like, I need to get out. I need to see a tree or a mountain or something. But that initial trip is what has changed my life and has got the ball rolling for me to go back into school and to change my life. Because I mean, my life was good before, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I feel like living in Barrow, you know, creating and establishing a lifestyle of like almost a career-like job, figuring, okay, I'm important. I am an important person. Everybody's important, but sometimes I didn't really realize it living in Washington. And when I was in Barrow, I felt like I was important. I felt like I was needed by my friends, by the people I worked with, and then from that, I remember when I left Barrow, I felt like I never wanted to come back up there again. But then there was this like, oh wow, I really miss it up there. I miss my friends, because there's just a whole different lifestyle up there, a whole different culture. The people treat you differently. They're more understanding. Everybody's very welcoming and wonderful, and yeah. And I am just so glad I decided to take that plunge and go to that foreign area that I was never used to, because it's really cultured me into this whole brand new person that I am today. And I love Barrow, and I I appreciate everything that that city has ever done for me, and Illisovic College. And there's my story about traveling to a foreign land.